I think I would say that one of the things that I've been very fortunate about is being born and brought up in India, which is a wonderful country of so many diverse faiths and religion. And then personally, I have been even more fortunate in that I had exposure because of my schooling to also grow up within a Buddhist community and a Buddhist monastery, as well as a Christian convent. And then growing up in a land predominantly a Hindu country. And so the exposure since my childhood to many religious faiths and growing up with immense love and wonderful examples to follow, I think I would like to believe that has gone in many ways into my trying to appreciate my own faith more deeply, but within a wider spectrum of understanding. And I would say in simple words, not being hesitant about the others. So the living examples of wonderful Christian teachers and preachers and sisters who led us in our schools and gave wonderful teachings, wonderful Hindu masters who are very much around this area, and then the Buddhist monastic training, I think is a wonderful symphony that really allows us to benefit in so many different ways. So being surrounded in that environment and atmosphere, I would say that it's always been what has nurtured and what has made me, I think, appreciate my own belief and my own path of practice much more deeply. I think what stands very much sort of dominant in my own memory is that I grew up in this monastery, and it's one of the very prominent monasteries for the Buddhists. And at the same time, half the day that I used to spend here, half the day I used to go to school and being brought up in the Christian convent background. But what we had were wonderful sisters and brothers who would come to the monastery, and their openness to our own atmosphere and our own monastic education and the teachers from a childhood became very much more an inspiration for me. So I grew up seeing them open, my teachers open to them, the sisters of the convent being very open to the Buddhist teachings, ceremonies, integration, coming to our prayers, us trying to go and attend the church ceremonies. And when a child grows up in that environment and understanding, I think the hesitancy and the fear and the apprehension, or just the distance, physical distance even, I think diminishes. And that's been a great, great advantage in my life. I think one grows up, for me personally, I would say I grew up trying to understand, emulate, and follow the example of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who always speaks about harmony among different faiths and beliefs. So in the beginning, of course, you tend to follow those instructions, but in the opportunities of sitting and listening to the words of wisdom of the great teachers, especially because the area that we are here is so many Hindu centers are around here. There are the churches here, and the Buddhist, different kinds of Buddhist lineages are here. So whenever there is an opportunity, especially growing up, going to many different teachings and teachers, I think has, I would say, tremendously enhanced my own understanding of Buddhism. For a few years, as I was growing up, my teachers always encouraged me to go to the different ashrams and attend the different satsangs or the different teachings that are happening. Today you have the advantage of also listening on the media, many of the teachers who are there. So those are, I think, what has gone all pull up into really benefiting oneself. Dehradun, especially the Dehradun area, which is very near Haridwar and Rishikesh, have wonderful teachers that you can go to. You can also live life with them in the ashrams that are there. I grew up very much closer to the Christian community because I went to a Christian school. And so some of the wonderful teachers, we had a wonderful sister superior who used to make it a point to give us scripture union classes. And in her scripture union, Sister Valerie, and she belonged to the Franciscan order, And she used to make it a point to sit with children from different backgrounds, knowing that I came from a very Buddhist family and a background. She would make it a point to listen to us, even as children, not so much talk down to us, but to engage in conversation. And she would come and attend many of our ceremonies here and made me feel very comfortable going into churches. So today, the result of that is I can walk into an ashram and feel very comfortable. I can walk into a church and do my prayers and feel very comfortable as I am in a Buddhist shrine room. I think the recent one is through the Elijah and the conversations that I have heard. I have always wanted to learn more. And so to be able to have the opportunity to sit in the presence of wonderful teachers, especially within the forum of Elijah, the recent one being in Amritsar that I was able to attend several years ago. But that gave me an enormous inspiration to actually see how much wisdom is there shared. And that quote that I picked up during the meetings of the great leaders was this whole thing that's remained in my mind, unity in diversity. We spoke about that. That I don't think there can be any better understanding than to appreciate and to respect the diversities that are there. But if there is an innate respect, knowing there is a diversity, then I think harmony is possible. I took that one particular inspiration from the meeting of the Elijah that came from some wonderful teachers from many, many different faiths. You know, I would say that when you talk to a common person, most will be in agreement that there should be mutual harmony and understanding and so forth. But I think a lot remains superficial until education. And the dedication to education can't be appreciated in each individual. So yes, a message could be the seed, but for the seed to grow, education and making time and having the, courage and the effort that you would put into learning and appreciating of other faith is an absolute must. Without that, I think a lot would remain just very superficial. I think we are all growing up in a time that calls for all of us to now not be lost in political correctness, but to really search in one's own self, that if you feel strongly about the future and the harmony of the world, then there is a responsibility each one of us has. And that responsibility is to develop better understanding. But a better understanding can't be had just spontaneously. I think it has to be effort-based. There has to be exchange, clear communication, humility. Tremendous humility is needed to be good listeners rather than to constantly talk about how good you are. I think that one of the challenges we all face as anyone connected to different faiths and religion is that we appreciate everybody else, but we always think there's that British saying, first among equals. And as long as we believe that, I don't think we are going to make any breakthrough. We'll have to understand the definition of equality much more clearly than that. I'm not so sure that there can be much advancement made by trying to put everything into one big pot and made to look alike. I think the beauty of anything that is natural is in the diversities. And so let's take an example of a beautiful garden with different flowers. And I think we have to look at making a garden beautiful and not just talk about one flower being better than the other. I don't think so. I think so far the world has survived and civilizations have continued to make progress and development, and whatever sanity we've had, I think, comes from some of the very deep, profound wisdoms of the different faiths. and each faith evolved in a civilization. And I really think that it couldn't have been any other faith that would have done so much good in that time and period and area and atmosphere than that particular religion that arose at that time. And so therefore I think we have to appreciate the diversity, and the humility I think is very important in knowing that it is different, but there are common grounds. So whatever are the common grounds, we could all meet with that, and then there should be immense humility, as well as, I would say, keeping the greater vision of the benefit of all. Differences, I think, are the beauty of each of the beliefs. So the differences are for the particulars, and then there's a general common ground where we can all meet. If one is a true Buddhist, I would say, as many of our teachers say, and it is absolutely true, if you understand a little bit of Buddhism, you would know that it is much more like a fragrance of a flower or of a beautiful scent or a beautiful incense, and it just permeates in the room. It's very fragrant. So from a Buddhistic perspective, I do not see any conflict or any difficulty in sort of merging with different beliefs and ideas. As in any other faith and belief, there are particular views within Buddhism as well that may not necessarily go along with the beliefs of many different other faiths, but that is a Buddhist problem. And I don't think that should be a cause of lessening any understanding and appreciation of the relative world. I think Buddhism as it is should be the one that can actually get along and harmonize. Well, I think we have crossed the time and the period where we are going to now just talk over tea and coffee about how worried we are about where the world is headed to. And if there is any social awareness and responsibility in people, then the time for action is definitely arising. And therefore, whether out of belief and faith, or whether out of compassion for the others, or simply because as a human responsibility, it is imperative that each person awakens to this very important dialogue that is the cause of a lot of conflict, but because it is the cause of conflict, has to also be the solution to that conflict. Well, prayers are so often understood to being something that you do for others. One of the concepts about prayers from a Buddhist perspective is also that a prayer is a reminder to your own conscience. And so yes, definitely, prayers and praying together, I think, deepens a spiritual bond. It is tremendously powerful in that all voices come together with one vision. And most importantly, I think it really gives you the silence and the time beyond sound to recognize your own innate awareness. And from that ground, I think responsibility arises. The sense of responsibility arises. I think I'll keep it very simple. It's probably time to talk less, listen more.